Thank you, Arlen. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had an awesome day. I hope it's beautiful weather where you are. It's almost 70 here where I am, so I'm so thankful for the sun today. I'm very honored to be here with all of you, and what I invite you to do for the next hour is just put all of your stress to the side. I know that it is a crazy year. I know it's very difficult, and I admire everything you're doing to keep yourselves healthy and keep your kids healthy. So I just want you to know that we don't often take time for ourselves, but this hour is definitely for you. So if you're at the office, throw your feet up on the desk. If you're at home, grab a beverage of your choice, whatever it is that you need to do. But I'm really honored to be here with all of you today. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so welcome to Soaring Balloons and Heavy Shackles, helping the most challenged kids soar. Today's webinar will be a practical, purposeful, and powerful way to look at our kids who've been traumatized, those who are misunderstood, and those who take frequent detours from what's expected. I'd like to share a resource with you that goes more in depth after the webinar to help educators understand that our goal is not to fix our students, but instead it's to guide them on their journeys. My latest book was published in August 2020, and it's my life's work to educate and support all of you regarding kids who communicate their needs through challenging behavior. Often in schools, we hear things like, those kids don't belong in my class, or those kids don't belong in our school. And sometimes kids with significant needs thrive in an alternative environment. However, many times we kick kids out because we aren't confident or equipped to understand the why behind their behavior and what we can collectively do to guide them on their journeys. After much reflection, practicing perspective, and experience working with kids who struggle with emotions, I've come to the conclusion that those kids are our kids, and we must spread that message in everything that we do. As a forever teacher and former school administrator, I'm aware that we're often expected to, yet not given the resources or the time necessary to work with special needs, distracted kids, mental illness, emotional stress, behavioral deficiencies, trauma, and dysregulated children. Believe me when I say I see you and I hear you, and I've developed many practical supports for all of you. As a mother of a child who's worked tirelessly to be understood, he needs your awareness of mental health, and so do the thousands of kids and families who struggle with mental health issues. My book is available on Amazon and through my website, and bulk order discounts are available if you're interested in providing the opportunity for your staff. Before we begin, I'd like to share this quote from Adolph Brown. "We are all flawed. We need to focus on excellence, not perfection. We need to be better next year than last year, better next month than this month, and better tomorrow than today." What beautiful and breathtaking words that can bring peace to our lives. What an awesome quote to share with our kids who struggle. A great reminder to all of us that we aren't perfect, nor do we have to be. One day at a time, working to realize that this is a journey, not a destination. I'd like to ask all of you if you know why you do this amazing, frustrating, and rewarding work. Why do you get out of bed each day and face the challenges of being an educator? My why has two parts, and I'd like to share those with you. The drawing on the left is very dear to my heart, and I see it in all I do and all I say when spreading my message about traumatized kids. The verbal part of my why is this: I hope my achievements in life shall be these, that I will have fought for what was right and fair, that I will have risked for that which mattered, and that I will have given help to those who were in need, that I will have left the earth a better place for what I've done and who I've been. What is your why? Do you have one? And if you don't, I really encourage you to think about it. Let's acknowledge the storm. Part of being trauma-informed is knowing that everyone you meet, including your colleagues and students, have stories and experiences that shape their behavior. I acknowledge the difficult work you engage in, and I thank you for doing what's right for kids, while doing all you can to keep yourselves mentally and physically healthy. I acknowledge that some of you have lived through or are experiencing trauma right now. I may share some things today that make you uncomfortable, and I want you to know there's no intention to upset you, yet want to help all understand that trauma is raw and trauma is real. I acknowledge that some of you have been through the painful experience of death and that we all grieve differently, which impacts our behavior. I acknowledge the frustration of changing mandates, expectations, and rules, especially because all we really want to do is educate kids. It's all a part of the storm. And as educators, we get to either be a part of the problem or a part of the solution. Both parts impact kids every single day, and there's nothing cliche about it. Instead, it's a beautiful opportunity that we have in front of us. One of the most painful days of my life was February 7th, 2012. I was an assistant principal at the time, taking very good care of my teachers, my students, and my families. My children attended a school in the same district just 1 mile away. About 8 o'clock p.m. that evening, my life and that of my family's was changed forever. It was the night my 6-year-old clung to my leg in terror as tears streamed from his face. "Mom, please love me. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please don't stop loving me." It was the night he told me what happened in the bathroom stall at school. As a first grader, he was supposed to be playing on the monkey bars, learning to read, and making new friends. But our story is quite different and impacts our lives every single day. My son was sexually abused for 4 months of his life in a public school bathroom during recess. I share this with you because this was the beginning of our trauma journey. It has been and will continue to be a roller coaster of difficulty, and I've learned so much about how trauma affects the brain, the mind, and the heart. Even more, trauma impacts behavior, and as educators, this is something we must be aware of. I've learned over the past 10 years that I can't fix my son, which honestly breaks my heart every day. What I have learned, though, is that his behavior is communication. And the more we work to understand the why behind our students' behavior, the better we can be at understanding that school is not an academic race. Instead, it's a place of growing, healing, and survival for many of our students. The most simple way I can explain trauma is that it's an emotional response to a disturbing event. The trauma response is normal, but our bodies weren't made to deal with this emotional struggle. Trauma affects the entire family and doesn't just go away. The effects of trauma play a role in human development and learning. Some examples of trauma are physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, bullying, divorce, neglect, terrorism, war, domestic issues, community-based violence, civil unrest, and now this big one, a pandemic. When our kids have gone through trauma and then come to school and they're expected to sit, listen, respond, and be motivated to work, we've missed the point that trauma changes the brain, the behavior, and the reactions of a child. The more aware we can be, the greater chance our kids have to heal and actually be available to learn in school. Trauma restructures a child's neural networks. It affects attention and memory, in addition to executive functioning skills such as organization, planning, and self-regulation. I'd like to talk about expectations versus awareness. In school, we expect our kids to come ready to learn, to be organized, to possess executive functioning skills, and to be able to self-regulate. If our kids aren't ready to learn, we sometimes become frustrated and wonder what's wrong with them. With the pressure of the education system, I understand why we feel such stress to get all of the kids moving in the same direction, on the same path, at the same time, but you see, that goes against human nature. Instead, what if we're aware that this is not a race and that every kid will develop at different times? What if we were aware that not every child reads well at age 4? Not every 7th grader is successful simplifying algebraic expressions, and not every high school kid can handle a caseload of AP classes. What is the rush? Now add trauma and mental instability to the picture. With our expectations, it becomes a nightmare for many of our kids. We wonder why kids are having outbursts and becoming emotionally unwell. The rush stresses out our educators to the max as well, because we're told to fit every student in a certain box of expectations that make no sense to us. High expectations are a wonderful thing, but different expectations are even better, especially for our kids who've been traumatized, are misunderstood, and those who practice frequent detours from what's expected. So together, let's continue working to be aware of what's happening around us instead of expecting the same thing for all of our kids. The trauma cycle has 4 parts, and as educators, we only have control over one of them. When our kids go through trauma, internally, they may feel things like anger. They may be anxious, sad, desperate, lonely, frustrated, lost, vulnerable, and even feel out of control. They feel this way because of external factors, also called triggers, which could be a certain smell, the end of a relationship, the anniversary of an event, seeing someone that reminds him of the trauma, a holiday, a particular place, perceived danger, or bad weather. Those triggers then result in behaviors that we might see at school. Some of our kids cry, scream, some hide, some are irritable and can't concentrate, some sit alone, some have emotional outbursts or act out physically, some feel out of it or lethargic, some have a lack of interest in school and schoolwork, and some even seek profession. They feel these emotions eternally because of those external factors called triggers, which can result in behaviors we see at school that can look like defiance. The only control we have is the response to our behavior. And the more we understand about how trauma impacts behavior, the better prepared we can be to be proactive with strategies, which start with practicing perspective, with empathy, and understanding what every human being is looking for. Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry partnered for a 60-minute special on childhood trauma. This powerful piece opens our eyes as educators at the difference we can make with our words, our actions, and our expressions. As you watch, please listen to what Oprah says every human being is searching for, because that is what we can do to help reach those hard to reach kids on their journeys.
Oprah, your story for 60 Minutes this week is about childhood trauma. And there's a lot of new science here about trauma informed care.
I think the audio is a little quiet, so I think I'm going to share
Traumatized.
my version.
What
Okay,
can they
I'll
learn
stop
from
then.
your story?
Yeah, you can.
Well, I think
Yeah, let me switch over here.
Okay.
All right, and then I'm going to share the Oprah video. Here we go.
Thank you.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Then we'll just need to mute our microphones.
Okay.
A Correspondent Candid with Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah, your story for 60 Minutes this week is about childhood trauma. And there's a lot of new science here about trauma informed care. For anyone who's dealing with a traumatized child, what can they learn from your story?
Well, I think that this story is it is my hope that our story on trauma-informed care will not just be impactful, but will also be revolutionary. It certainly has caused a revolution in my own life. And I was struck by the story because it reminded me of my own childhood growing up in Milwaukee. It's not lost on me, the irony of being back in the same city, Milwaukee, where I grew up on welfare, poor, a lot of negative experiences, sexual abuse and all of that. What's the difference between a really bad childhood and being able to overcome that, and a traumatic childhood and someone not being able to overcome that?
Really, it boils down to something pretty simple.
And the answer that Dr. Bruce Perry gives you is relationships.
If you also have opportunities to be connected to people in positive ways, that can buffer some of those effects. And as you get older,
I'd like to know more about that.
What he really means is love. He's a scientist, he's not going to use the word love, but it really is about how you are responded to, valued, trusted, and loved by those around you. So I didn't get it from the people who I felt I should have gotten it from. It can be anybody who cares enough about you to ask the question, what happened to you?
Could you trace back in your mind it was that person who made the
I know
difference.
exactly who did it. I know exactly the moment I started to feel valued, and for me, it was school.
I wanted to be a fourth grade teacher because of Mrs. Duncan. And I haven't seen Mrs. Duncan since then, and Mrs. Duncan is here today. Mrs. Duncan!
The moment I felt the most value was in my fourth grade class when Mrs. Duncan said to me, I was the one who was chosen to lead the class and whatever it was.
So what was that like? I don't really remember. I do remember you.
I remember you were such a fluent reader.
Well,
if I had a class full of students like Oprah, I would have been floating on air.
Mrs. Duncan instilled in me this sense of believing that I mattered. And that is what every human being is looking for.
when you first heard that I had done something in life, did you know that it was me?
Yes, I kept up with you without your being aware of it.
And it was Mrs. Duncan who helped heal you?
For me, yes. It was Mrs. Duncan, and then it was my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Graham. It was school that made me feel a sense of value and connection.
You learned a lot on this story.
Oh, I learned a lot on this story. This story was life-changing for me.
Life-changing, really.
Life-changing. And people use that word rhetorically. Life-changing. It's changed the way I operate in my business, with my people, with my school. 1, 2, 3. You say that the most important question to ask of people who have gone through trauma is not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Yeah.
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 So when you see, a church being shot up, or you see, all of the headline-making stories of people seemingly gone mad, your first thought is, what happened to that person?
Right.
Right? What has been life-changing for me is the question, what happened to you? Not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you? Which is an important question, not just for people who have been so-called traumatized, but it's the most important question you can ask of anyone. I can say that of all the stories I've ever done in my life and all of the experiences I've ever had and people I've interviewed, this story has had more impact on me than practically anything I've ever done.
It's changed the way you see everyone?
It's changed the way I see everyone. So when I have an employee who is acting out of line or who is just being a jerk, I don't think, what's wrong with that guy? What's wrong with that girl? What's wrong with that person? I think, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what happened that caused them to behave that way. That's what this story did for me.
Okay, we are back. Heidi, I'm going to make you the presenter, and you will just have to share your screen with us one more time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Did the video play okay for you, Heidi?
Yes.
Okay, I know we had a few out there who weren't getting sound, and I apologize for that. Hopefully it was captured on the recording, and we'll be able to replay that for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Arlen. So instilling the belief that I matter is one of the most powerful things you can do for every child, regardless of what has happened to them. It was when I became a principal that I realized that we just expect our teachers to build relationships with kids, especially tough ones. And in all honesty, some of them didn't know how. Some were so laser focused on academics that building relationships wasn't a part of their makeup. So I realized I had to create practical strategies to help our teachers not only build and maintain strong relationships with tough kids, but teach them that the foundation of what we do must be compassion before curriculum if we want curriculum to stick. Our awe, our actions, words, and expressions either help kids soar or add weight to their shackles. Sometimes we think, this kid needs so much help, there's no way I can do anything about her issues. Or this kid needs serious therapy, what can I possibly do? I'm here to tell you that there are a million things you can do because you don't have to fix her. Just guide her on her journey. As a teacher, a principal, and especially a mother, I can tell you that you can practice simple things that make a very serious difference, such as a smile, being kind, showing empathy, differentiating expectations, and working to see life from someone else's perspective. You can possess a consequence mindset rather than a punishment mindset. And that is something that's in your packet on the last page. It goes through a discussion guide of what does it mean to have a consequence mindset versus a punishment mindset, because it definitely has an effect on how we deal with teachers and kids in our schools. You can put social emotional needs before academic needs without feeling guilty. The time passes for all of us, regardless of our needs. So know that you can help them soar, or you can add weight to their shackles simply by what you say, what you do, and what you believe. Dr. Bruce Perry tells us the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he will be to recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. I'd like you to listen to a few clips that I put together of Dr. Bruce Perry, helping us understand the role trauma plays on our kids. And please understand that even if you are the principal of the year, the teacher of the year, or parent of the year, circumstances for kids who've been through trauma will be difficult. But the best part is that we can be a part of the solution.
All right, Heidi, let me bring up this. Well, let's see if your clip plays.
Okay.
That very same sensitivity that makes you able to learn language just like that as a little infant makes you highly vulnerable to chaos, threat, inconsistency, unpredictability, violence. And so children are much more sensitive to developmental trauma than adults.
So if you're a child who's raised in a nurturing and well cared for environment, you're more likely to have a well-wired brain.
Correct.
And if you're a child who's raised in an environment of chaos, of uncertainty, of violence, of neglect, you are being wired
differently.
Differently.
And typically in a way that makes you more vulnerable. Kids that grow up like that have much higher rates of risk for mental health problems, much higher rates of risk for doing poorly in school.
For just functioning in the
world.
world.
Exactly. We're learning more and more about is how unpredictability, chaos, overt threat, significant exposure to violence changes your stress response system. And now there's a lot to that, but one of the core problems with that is that if you're really, really tuned up and you have this continuous state of sort of fear that you're living with, when you go to school, even if it's a good school, you can't learn very well because parts of your brain that would normally be open for learning are shut down because your brain's saying, that's not that important right now. What's really important is who's connected to who, what's going on outside there, am I going to get hurt? And so when I said rhythm, the reason I said rhythm is that anybody who feels dysregulated, if you move, if music, rhythmic conversation, relational connection, all these things quiet your stress response system and make you capable of learning. And so,
you're saying that hip hop heals?
Absolutely, I am saying hip hop heals. I am saying you can learn more lines of text in rhythm than you can if it's straight prose. You know, they would tell me they'd have these kids. They'd say, "This kid's illiterate. He's got no cognitive issues and blah blah blah, and he can't read." And then I'd start talking with him, and I'd say, "Do you know any music?" And he'd spit out like 25 lines of rhyme, and I go, "There's nothing wrong with this kid's brain. This kid hasn't been regulated enough. He hasn't been taught the right." Our brain is incredibly malleable and very plastic, particularly early in life. And again, we've sort of invented ourselves into a world where we spend the least amount of time, least amount of energy, least amount of resources at the time when the brain is most malleable to shape it. And so that's just a form of social cultural insanity that we have to remedy. We just, it's, you know, if you came from outer space and you looked at the biology of the human organism, and then you looked at the allocation of resources, you'd go, what the hell? I mean, the mismatch is absurd. And in fact, I would argue at this point, the mismatch is immoral.
So the power of knowledge. Now that we have a very basic knowledge about trauma and what it does to our brain, our mind, and our heart, we're going to pivot to what I call the social emotional alphabet, or the ABCs of making every day the best day for every child. These are 26 practical strategies to support educators in working with challenging behavior. We will review some of those letters today, but all of the strategies and resources for discussion provided are in the Those Kids Study Guide that is available for purchase as an instant download on my website. Every letter has a poster that serves as a visual reminder. So we're going to start with A. A stands for acknowledge before accusation, and the poster reads, validation is something we all search for. We all search for validation, and oftentimes kids who've been traumatized or who are misunderstood so badly want to be heard. But sometimes they don't get that opportunity. We can provide that opportunity by offering due process and tweaking our vocabulary to better build connections with our tough kids. Offering due process means that every side of the story needs a chance to be heard. Often with kids who seem to be in trouble, we sometimes assume that they're guilty without offering them a chance to tell their perspective. When kids who are already struggling don't get a chance to tell their story, they go farther down the rabbit hole of anger and anxiety of being misunderstood. Every child, regardless of the situation, must be given an opportunity to speak their side to an adult that will offer an unbiased ear. Word choice plays a significant role in the outcome of any behavioral situation with our kids. When we know the details of what happened, when we want to know, we can sarcastically ask, "What did you do?" which is accusatory in nature and paints the picture of guilt. Or we could say, "Hey, tell me what happened," which gets us the same outcome without that accusation. When we acknowledge our students before we accuse them of anything, we build relationships. When we accuse our kids before acknowledging their stories, we drive a wedge between human connection. Our B is bonfire behavior, and the poster reads, behavior is like a bonfire. Your awe can either accelerate it or calm it. At the end of the day, each one of us is either part of the problem or part of the solution. When kids are dysregulated, our actions, words, and expressions matter and shape the behavior of the child in that moment. When a child is met with a calm, curious, and non-accusatory adult, the outcome will be much better than with an adult who is loud, judgmental, and accusatory. Truth be told, a child who struggles with behavior can do well first period and drown second period with a different teacher. And much of it has to do with how we identify with the bonfire or the behavior, how we handle that as the adult. We as the adults either accelerate behavior or we calm it. C is compassion before curriculum. The poster reads experiences and opportunities. That's what it's really about. That's what they'll remember. Strong curriculum and content knowledge are essential to our kids' success. We know that, as well as excellent classroom management and amazing teachers doing amazing things. I'm not underplaying the importance of academics, just identifying that without compassion, curriculum doesn't have a chance to stick, especially with our traumatized kids, our misunderstood kids, and our hard to reach kids. Remember, it's not a race. We get there, wherever there is for us, with compassionate, empathetic, and supportive adults guiding us and providing hope on our journeys. Who are the educators you remember? My guess is that they played either a significantly positive role or an unfortunately negative role in your schooling, and it had little to do with academics. The definition of compassion has two parts, and many educators possess the first, but it is those who practice the second that get through to kids who struggle with their emotions. According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of compassion is sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. The desire to alleviate it. This is the foundation of the greatest building block to human connection and relationships. Although we can't fix our kids, We can help take weight and struggle out of their backpacks by listening, understanding, and putting their mental wellness above all else. This cartoon sums up our education system, and I admire those of you who fight this on a daily basis. The gentleman behind the desk says, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Our education system. Everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. You have the power to help a fish climb a tree. The power is in your actions, your words, and your expressions to build confidence in our kids who sometimes feel hopeless because they feel they don't matter. When we make kids feel like they matter, we provide that building block of self-confidence because every child is one adult away from believing in and striving for happiness in this world that's not always so kind. Our D is defiant versus deficient. It reads, it's more about what's being said than how it's being said. Kids who struggle to regulate their emotions often tell it like it is and are quite honest. If we rise above and disregard their tone while we work through the behavior, we gain momentum in helping the child feel regulated. When things are more calm, we then work on the tone of the child. But my question is this: what came first, defiance or deficiency? Check out the definition of each word and think about our kids and their behavior. Are they defiant or are they deficient? The definition of deficient is lacking in some necessary quality or element. We can be deficient in iron or vitamin C, but we can also be deficient in our ability to regulate our emotions, talk appropriately to others, and resolve conflict. The definition of defiant is a disposition to resist, willingness, or contend or fight. One may ask, what is a defiant kid fighting for? And the answer is identity and to be understood. So the struggling student who gets in your face, is she defiant or is she deficient in her ability to self-regulate and appropriately communicate her needs? We get to decide how to handle every situation with our kids, and our actions, our words, and our expressions either help the kids soar or add weight to their shackles. Our E is empower over ego, and the poster says, we are entrusted with the most precious gift in the world, kids. When we think about the challenges of providing an awesome experience for our staff, our students, and our families, we can't forget all of the adults in the building who can be part of the solution. Since strong, trusting relationships are needed for student growth, the goal is for each member of the school community to play a role. Oftentimes, our professional development omits bus drivers, cafeteria workers, resource officers, secretaries, and paraprofessionals. Yet, as we know, they all play a vital role in the culture of the school. These people and their actions, their words, and their expressions work with our kids each day, yet many times we provide little opportunity for them to be a part of the collective responsibility and feel an important part of what we do. If we are learning online right now, what if we invited some of this list to read a story or participate in a discussion or just stop by and say hello? Raising happy and healthy kids takes all of us working together for the common good. It is certainly a collective responsibility. Speaking of collective responsibility, we can learn so much about being a supportive community through elephants. Elephants work together to take care of their young. The math department works with the English department, and the custodians partner with the superintendent. Everyone knows their role and feels appreciated in the elephant community. They work together to raise, teach, love, and nurture the calves to grow and live productive lives. Isn't that what we're all trying to do? We certainly can't do it alone. So taking care of each other and knowing that we all need each other to raise positive, productive citizens of their world is crucial. One key component to helping our most challenged kids soar is knowing that not all of our kids come to school ready to learn. Some of our kids do not come ready to learn, and some are merely surviving. Dr. Jacob Ham does an excellent job sharing what kids are like in learning brain versus survival brain. And this gives us yet another perspective to think about whether we're face to face with our kids in person, whether we're learning virtually. We have to understand that their behavior is communication, and being aware is something we need to do in order to help raise our kids, our school, and our community.
Hey, welcome back. Today, I really wanted to think about what's the best way to teach teachers about trauma without getting them distracted with all the technical stuff, and what's the most important thing for them to understand and learn. And I thought that the best way to do it might be to just make a difference between a learning brain versus a brain in survival mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and grays and vagueness, and it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony, can look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. It doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of getting things wrong. And they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes, and they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on. They don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff, and they're afraid that other people can see how stupid they really are. Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again. Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now, the kicker is that for traumatized people, stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that rock grow way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive ambiguous situations as threatening and stressful, that rock just stays big all the time. Now, the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be in learning brain, right? Because that rock is a lot smaller. And what I really want to highlight for teachers is that the best way to keep students in learning brain goes back to why I spent so much time talking about attachment. Students best learn when they feel like they're safe and supported by the adults around them. So it's kind of like a baby elephant. You know how like on those nature shows, the baby elephant is like playing with leaves or exploring a tree or something like that and having a lot of fun. And the only reason why they can do that is because there's a whole group of mama elephants around that baby protecting it and looking out for danger. So a kid with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused looking out for threat and danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn and play as a way to learn. So I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have any.
So the kids who need love the most will ask for it in the most unloving ways. When you think about the kids either in front of you right now those who log on to your e-learning every day, and even those who don't show up. Think about where they are in their lives and know that as long as you are doing the very best you can to advocate, support, and love them, you are adding value to their education, their journey in their life. Remember, every child who struggles is one adult away from feeling like they matter. Our O is open to opposition, and the poster reads, "Looking for a magic wand? It's there if you want to see it." Open to opposition is just that. Knowing that as educators, not every child is going to bring us a shiny apple and do all of their homework. Being open to the fact that we will encounter kids who will be oppositional is a step in the right direction so we can be proactive in helping our kids grow. I often heard from social workers, special education teachers, and counselors that they would feel frustrated going into classrooms sometimes because they felt that the teachers wanted them to come in and deal with the problem, right? Deal with the child who's having issues. They would often say to me, "Heidi, it's like they think I have a magic wand." And what I shared with them is that we have to continue empowering every teacher to understand that they do have a magic wand if they want to use it. The M in magic stands for "it's not about me." Being an educator, we take a back seat to our personal needs to help kids overcome issues and difficulties. We work to not take behavior personally because our reaction can be either part of the problem or part of the solution. The A stands for positive attitude because we can't get very far if we're always complaining about what kids bring to us. G is being open to growth as an educator. No matter how long we've done this awesome work, there's always something new to be learned. The I is that there's no I in team, and we not only have to rely on each other for help, we have to take care of each other. Finally, the C is search for the cause. All behavior is communication, and when we search for the why behind behavior and put the pieces together, we better understand where the child is coming from and how we can be a part of the solution. The last letter we will visit today is P, which is practice perspective. The poster says, "Behavior tells a story. Perspective gives it a chance to unfold." When we are curious about behavior instead of judgmental, we learn the skills and strategies that help all kids learn. It's about human connection. Our perspective is our reality, and the key is to turn the corner to life to see perspective from another point of view, especially the point of view from our challenging kids. You see, some people see a weed and some people see a wish. The man on the land is so happy to see the boat, but the man in the boat is overwhelmed to see the land. The key is, can we understand why each is excited, or do we see just one side? If your student provided this answer, would you consider it humorous or disrespectful? Some teachers lose it over this, and some take it in stride. I have to say, though, the answer isn't wrong. You've been working so hard for 6 weeks on a health unit, and then you have a kid give you this answer. Are you okay with it? It depends on your perspective. Charlie Brown says, "Someday we will all die, Snoopy." And Snoopy says, "True, but on other days, we will not." It's about your perspective. And then there's a math test, and this kid, right? Bob has 36 candy bars. He eats 29. What does Bob have now? And the kid answers, diabetes. Well, the answer isn't wrong, and he certainly shares knowledge of the connection between diabetes and candy. But the question is, what perspective do you take when a child answers like this? At the end of the day, helping kids soar or adding weight to their shackles comes down to this perspective. Is he giving me a hard time, or is he having a hard time? Truly, this is where we get to decide how interactions with our kids who struggle are going to go. Q-tip stands for quit taking it personally. And it's in our emotional profession that can be difficult to do, but certainly necessary if we're trying to alleviate stress for ourselves and for others. When I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote down happy. They told me I didn't understand the assignment. I told them they didn't understand life. Behavior tells a story. Perspective gives it a chance to unfold. I want to share a final clip with you and let you know that I believe everyone you meet has dirt on their shirt. Sometimes you can see it and sometimes you can't, but know it's there. How we react to dirt is the true understanding of acknowledgement before accusation and compassion before curriculum, because it's all about perspective.
Oh my goodness. Tawa ka pa. Eh, alam mo naman, pag dumi, ayaw ni Mami, di ba? Di ba? Oh, ba't nagdumi ka?
Oh! Ano yan? Saan ka galing? Ano na naman? Saan ka na naman naglaro? Anong ginawa mo? Bakit ang dumi? Ayan. Ang dumi-dumi. Ikaw maglaban niya na. Oh my God.
Ang dumi-dumi mo,
Gusto ko talaga makita siyang malinis. Every time. Ayoko may masabing hindi maganda sa anak ko kasi masakit yun sa akin bilang ina.
That's you. Can I help you? Ay, bakit to? Bakit naman?
Ano ba yung sasabihin ng mami? Hindi kasi magagalit?
Alam ko po magagalit siya, pero maging honest na lang po ako sa kanya.
Yun ang mabuti. Okay. So, high five. So, okay. Salamat, ha? Bye-bye.
Baby ko.
Super happy ako na sobrang proud talaga. Kasi hindi ko in-expect na ganito. Yung mga tinuturo namin sa kanya, yung mga paalala namin, na-apply niya talaga.
Kasi isipin niya, di ba, magagalit si mama. Hindi naman ganun eh. Talagang yung heart niya, nakita ko, super proud. Ang galing pala ng ano ko. Okay naman pala akong mami. Lagi ko rin kasi pong dinadaw niya sa sarili ko.
Hindi ko in-expect na ganun yung... Kasi nakita ko siya, akala ko makulit, akala ko naglaro. Tapos kaya pala ganun. Ayun lang, nagulat po ako. Hello po. Sige po. Ba't ka umiyak? Kasi pala ko nagkulit ka doon. Ayun naman pala, nag-help ka naman pala kayo.
When my son was 12 years old, he drew this picture representing his life. He said that no matter how hard he tries, he is always weighed down by his struggles. When I saw it, I told him that I see the shackles, but I also see a big bunch of beautiful balloons, and that we will always help him soar, no matter how heavy his shackles feel. Know that in everything you say, you are either helping a child soar or adding weight to his shackles. Please know, you making a difference every single day as an educator is not cliche. It is reality. Thank you so much for joining me today for this webinar, and a huge shout out to Arlen and the Illinois Principal Association for having me. I am very, very grateful.
All right, Heidi, thank you so much for sharing that powerful and inspiring message with us today. We've got plenty of time for questions, so feel free to type them into the Q&A box there. And we've already got one in from Michelle, so Heidi, we'll throw this one to you. Michelle says, hi, my question is how to create teacher and administrator buy-in. Also, how to handle pushback for those coming from a punishment mindset.
Okay, so I think the first thing I would say, I'm trying to get my camera up here so you guys can kind of see me. So give me a second and I'll try to do that. Ready, set, stop showing this. How about that?
There it is.
Yay, it's better to see my face. Okay, so I think the first thing that give yourself some grace, because I know that what I did, and I think the mistake I made is I tried to push this on people. I tried to, because it was so near and dear to my heart that I didn't understand why people wouldn't buy in, right? And we know that in schools we have teachers they're really there to teach curriculum, and we have teachers who are there to teach whole kids. And I think one of the greatest things you can do is you could use that resource that's in the back of the handout, because what it does is it talks about what punishment mindset looks like, what consequence mindset looks like. And if you have that discussion with your staff or your teams, however you want to do it, at least it's an opportunity for us to really talk about what our goals are. So if our goals are that every kid strives at our school, but we have some people on a track that are just punishment based all the time, then obviously that's a problem. And another thing that I learned is that I can't change people's behavior. And that is really, really frustrating, especially as a principal, because you do believe that people get into this job to make sure that the kids are getting the best education possible. And as principals, we're providing as much support as we can, but knowing that I can do everything I can to support it. And there's going to be backlash. There's always going to be backlash. Some people don't like change. Some people think that, they need to be punished. This is how it is. But what I've learned is that the more you can give them experience in seeing true stories of what really happens to kids, the better off we can be. And sometimes they soften up. And I've also had people who, no matter what I did or what I tried or how I tried to buy in, didn't. And I think that's part of accepting the human nature of it all. But that's an awesome question, and I think it's very valid for a lot of us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Heidi. Let's see what else we've got here. Heidi with an I, Heidi Provo, she says, thank you. This was amazing. So we just want to really appreciate you, Heidi, sharing your message today.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Here's a question from Tina. I'm a paraprofessional. How do you manage working with a student in a classroom when the teacher is too focused on scores than compassion?
So that's a great question. And you know what, Tina, I think paraprofessionals are some of the most underrated people in the world, to be honest. We rely on you guys to track data, to deal with behavior, to take kids out, to bring kids in, to regulate kids. And I think that one thing that I can tell you is to do what you have in your control. Because again, if you can model what you believe, because academics are important for all of us, but there are some of us who really understand that if we don't have that compassion and empathy and relationship for a kid, which sounds like you do, and I'm not saying the teacher doesn't, but from what you're saying, it sounds like you have a good grasp on understanding that it's not all about the scores and it's not all about the data all the time. I think that taking control of the things that you can do and modeling that is one of the only things that you can do. And perhaps sharing some things with the teacher that, hey, I did this with Billy and it really worked, or Billy really enjoyed this. I think your modeling and feeling good about what you're modeling is one of the most powerful things that you can do, because honestly, that's all you have control over.
Excellent. Thank you, Heidi. Marcy says, I loved your insight. I was abused as a child. You reminded me of the teachers who loved me, and as a school psychologist, you have reminded me of why I do what I do.
Awesome. God bless you. You got, and you know what? Look where you are today. That's what every time I present, I have people who tell me that there was some abuse in their lives, and I just continue to praise them and say, look at where you are, look what you've done, and look what you're doing for other people. So I commend you for that. Thank you for all that hard work that you do, because it's a thankless job. Absolutely.
All right, and Karina says, how do you convince students to deal with a teacher that is just not buying in? I know someone asked about how to get teachers to buy in, but what if they don't? What do you tell a student in order to have him or her still go to that class?
So this is where we get to kind of be on stage, right? As teachers and as principals, because we have to set the stage in a positive tone for our school, and we have to be professional, right? Like, we can't bash a teacher in front of a kid, because that's not teaching the kid anything, even though in our brains and in our hearts that we might think, you're right, you know what, I get why you don't want to go to that class, because I wouldn't want to go to that class either. But one thing that I've tried with kids that has worked is talking to them about, okay, so your teacher, and I'm going to use music class for an example. In music class, a kid who did not want to sing at all was just, the teacher thought the kid was defiant. I don't want to sing. I'm not going to do this. This is so dumb. So then the teacher's giving bad grades and complaining to the special ed team that the kid's not doing anything. So what we did is we talked about, okay, you know what? You don't want to sing. So let's strategize some ways that we can try to think that your teacher thinks you're singing, and we practice lip syncing, because then it looked like the kid was singing, and he felt a little bit of control over what was happening. And that is so tricky, because again, some of our teachers are not going to buy into our kids, but if we can continue to give kids strategies to get through those situations, because I do believe that there are stumbling blocks and problems regardless of how old we are and what issues we have and what jobs we have. So if we can give the kids just some little signals without ever bashing a teacher, because we don't want to do that, but giving them hints on how they could get through that class and feel good about it. And sometimes it's just teeny little things like, you're pretending to sing, so she thinks you're singing. So now we don't have a problem anymore. So little things like that is what I would encourage for you.
Perfect. Well, it is 4 o'clock, Heidi, so we want to respect everybody's time. I appreciate the opportunity to have a Q&A with you. I appreciate all of our participants who joined for this session, and I had the great questions for Heidi. I wanted to let everyone know that we did record this webinar. I know some people were having trouble hearing the videos. I'm hoping that everything was captured on the recording, which I will be sending out tomorrow to all registrants. So if you were here, you'll get it. And if you weren't able to attend the webinar, those individuals will get the recording as well. All right, Heidi, well, I'll let you sign off, and then everyone is free to close the GoToWebinar control panel, and that will log you out of the system.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have an awesome school year. Hang in there. You got this. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Heidi.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.